Ruth's Chris Steakhouse is a genius. The business could make its steak sizzle and be hot till the customer took the last bite. But that's not the only thing it is a genius at. It is also great at getting into trouble. And in this history of the franchise, you will see some of the most iconic troubles this business has gotten into. Before it was Ruth's, it was first Chris Steakhouse on 1100 North Broad Street near the Fairgrounds Racecourse in New Orleans. Chris Matalich, a New Orleans entrepreneur, founded it on February 27, 1927. The business could accommodate 60 people, but it had no parking lot. However, this didn't matter as the company continued to thrive and got sold 6 times. However, despite all those sales, Chris managed it for 38 years. How? Well, the business was weird. Every time Chris sold it to another person, they failed to make it work, and Chris repurchased it for cheap each time. It was in the middle of these sales and fails that Ruth Fertel, a woman who had no restaurant experience, decided to buy it. Ruth was a lab technician at Tulane School of Medicine in New Orleans. She had the intention to send her children to college and decided her lab technician job wouldn't be enough to do so. So she decided to buy Chris's steakhouse. However, Chris priced her out of the sale. He would only sell for $18,000. But Ruth, who has absolutely no idea what it took to run a restaurant, wasn't discouraged. She was going to take a loan and decided to mortgage her house. Her banker, lawyer, and friends were alarmed. No, they all said. But Ruth had made up her mind and made her first mistake. She took out an $18,000 mortgage on her home. However, the bank saw the danger of the woman taking the exact amount she needed for the purchase. They told her she would need more to pay for food, renovation, and other overhead costs. Ruth then changed her mind and took out a $22,000 loan instead. In 1965, the matriarch bought the restaurant, and it remained a question for her to answer. How would she stand out? Ruth began using family recipes and took a few recipes from her brother's restaurant, Sig's Antique Restaurant in Port Sulphur, Louisiana. Even if Ruth didn't like to admit it, it was from her brother that she got the recipe for her creamed spinach, which customers ordered alongside her butter-topped sizzling steaks. Speaking of steaks, when Ruth opened her store, she sold 35 steaks, charging about $5 for each one, which made her restaurant one of the upscale restaurants in New Orleans. She also did something that was unheard of at the time. She hired other single mothers as her waiters. And according to the chain, this led people to nickname Ruth and her staff the Broads on Broad Street. People loved dining at Ruth's, and it was just because of the food. We went out of our way to please customers. We spoiled them, Ruth said in an interview. The business owner ensured the customers got what they wanted and how they wanted it. One time, a customer came into the restaurant after a tooth surgery and could not chew. Ruth, who was involved in the restaurant operations, helped the customers blend the steak so they could eat it. And if you like to learn about the history of your favorite eateries, be sure to subscribe for more content like this. However, it wasn't that the business's steak wasn't delicious. Ruth even had a way of making it worth the customer's time even more. She began to tinker and came up with something customers instantly loved. The steakhouse started to serve steak that arrived at the customer's table sizzling hot. To achieve the sizzle, Ruth used her scientific knowledge to create a broiler that cooked steaks at 1800 degrees. Then she put butter on top, which produced a sizzling effect. The restaurant held on to that tradition for a long time, which helped build the brand. Business continued to boom, and within 6 months, the entrepreneur had made more than twice her annual salary at her lab technician job in Tulane. She was just warming up. However, she wasn't that ambitious. She liked her business the way it was, but everything would soon change. Under Ruth's leadership, Chris Steakhouse continued to thrive, and she signed an additional 10-year lease on the restaurant's building. She got another place near the restaurant that she wanted to rent out to people who wanted to throw parties. However, Ruth's plan crumbled like a pack of cards, and somehow, it was a good thing. A fire erupted in her restaurant in 1976, burning the building. The business owner was stunned, but she had an out. Still, it wasn't easy, as everything she had done up to that point had gone with the wind. She relocated her restaurant to the place she intended to rent as party space. The new location could hold up to 160 seats, which meant business would be better. However, there was a problem. Ruth's contract with Chris stated that she couldn't use the restaurant's name anywhere else apart from the original address, which, unfortunately, fire had destroyed. Changing a name now meant that she would have to start from scratch and could lose customers. Ruth had to get creative, or Chris would sue her, and with a lawsuit breathing down her neck, she came up with a solution after a while. She would take the name Chris with her, but she would add a spin that wouldn't break the agreement. So, the entrepreneur changed the business name to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse and absolutely hated the name. Many people thought she was Chris's wife. "I've always hated the name," she said, "but we've always managed to work around it." Ruth's Chris Steakhouse didn't want to franchise. It wasn't even in the owner's plans. She only wanted to maintain her business as it was. But her customers groaned when they were away from New Orleans and were in places where they couldn't get access to the restaurant. One of them, Thomas J. T.J. Moran, decided to take matters into his own hands. His love for Ruth's Chris Steakhouse made him approach the owner that he wanted to open a franchise in Baton Rouge, where he moved to from New Orleans. Despite Thomas's opening of a franchise location and the business it brought to the steakhouse, Ruth still wasn't shopping for franchise owners. They shopped for her instead. Loyal customers approached her for a franchise and she sold to them. When I started franchising, that really got the name out, and the more the name became known, the busier we became in all our restaurants. Our name recognition spread, Ruth recalled. The restaurant's recognition brought buyers. However, it wasn't until Ruth had lung cancer in 1999 that she sold 79.3% of her interest in Ruth's Chris Steakhouse to Chicago-based investment company Madison Dearborn Partners. The matriarch remained as a shareholder until she died in 2002. Madison Dearborn Partners expanded the chain to 86 restaurants, with some locations opening outside America. Despite the growth that the company recorded, it witnessed a slip in sales in 2003, but in 2004 it bounced back. The company went public in 2005 under President and CEO Craig Miller, and that same year, the business suffered a great tragedy. Hurricane Katrina rampaged Greater New Orleans, taking out the company's headquarters and other 2 locations, with one of them being the original location. The business wasn't the only affected, but unlike its competitor Morton, who decided to reopen its headquarters and rebuild, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse decided to move to Florida permanently. The business claimed it couldn't reopen the original location because the hurricane's destruction was far too much. It then added that it would give the location to charity. The Fertel family, especially Ruth's son Randy, didn't like the move and opposed it. Unfortunately, their opposition meant nothing as the company went ahead with the move. However, the company made good on the promise of gifting the damaged original location, and it gave it to Tulane University. After remodeling, the former restaurant opened in 2012 as a community health center named after Ruth. Speaking of Ruth, she wouldn't have liked what her business did to women. In 2011, a former female staff of the chain sued it for acts of discrimination against the female staff. How ironic. The suit alleged that female employees faced pay discrimination, weren't considered for promotions as often, and also had to work in a sexually charged environment. The company immediately denied the allegations, recounting its history as a company that a single mother founded and that it doesn't tolerate discrimination in any form. However, in 2017, another issue of discrimination arose. This time, it was on the customer side, which is another irony because Ruth always put her customers first. According to the lawsuit, black customers were treated differently and were asked to sit in a different place than other customers. Ruth's Chris Steakhouse has gotten used to public backlash, but the one it got in 2020 was completely on another level. Like many big businesses, the chain took advantage of a loophole in the Paycheck Protection Program, which was supposed to give low-interest loans to companies with less than 500 employees. The company formed the Ruth's Hospitality Group after it purchased Mitchell's Fish Restaurant and Columbus Fish Market brands from Cameron Mitchell Restaurants in 2008. The company then secured 2 $10 million loans for the businesses under it. The public heavily criticized the company for what it did when mom-and-pop stores that needed the money couldn't get it. Eventually, after much criticism, the business revealed it would return the money. Public backlash or not, the business was still able to continue operating, and it has become the subject of a sale, with Darden restaurants deciding to purchase it in 2023. Ruth's Chris Steakhouse began as a way to raise college funds and became a business that Ruth Fertel would be known and praised. Despite being inexperienced, the businesswoman was able to build a business empire that she oversaw until the time of her death was near. Unfortunately, her business has become subject to lawsuits and public backlash, one of which came from its decision not to rebuild the business's original location due to the effects of Hurricane Katrina. Do you think the company was right not to rebuild that location, or should it have at all costs? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to support our channel.